everyone. So, in today's lecture, we are going to explore uh, environmentalism and eco philosophy of society and animal kingdom in early Buddhist philosophy. So, when I say that environmentalism, this is a more modern historical method I am attributing to Buddhist canon of philosophy, primarily taken from Jataka stories. Jataka stories as a primary focus. We are not going to discuss the higher uh, textual tradition of Buddhism in ancient India. Rather, we are confining to merely the Jataka stories to understand the idea of environment, the idea of eco-philosophy of life, eco-philosophy of animal kingdom, eco-philosophy of Buddhist teachings that puts humans and non-human species in similar way in terms of positive, negative moralities of life. So that's about today's lecture. So what I'm going to do is I will discuss some theoretical conceptual framework in examining the Jataka stories for the benefit of figuring out what was environmentalism and ecological awareness in terms of understanding Buddhist philosophy in ancient India based on the sources that were the Jataka stories. So, in order to know uh, this so-called uh, environmental history in ancient India, Jatakas, as a popular tradition, can offer anthropomorphic and socio-animal consciousness in ancient India. This is my kind of. I was writing the notes last night without sleep, and one time I also have exam today. But this thing fascinated me, so I was reading the whole material till morning 3 a.m. This morning because Buddhist Jataka stories fascinates me, but I do believe that it will also fascinate you. So I will send some of the PDF articles concerning this thing. But lecture is also very important because lecture is something I am conceptualizing for you, erasing for you to understand what is this environmental method of understanding ancient Indian history from Jataka canon of Buddhist literature. Sanskrit literature was there. War elephants can be studied from Sanskritic texts, but Jataka stories offer a diverse and different kind of genre concerning understanding ancient Indian environment, ancient Indian society, from that of the elite tradition of Sanskrit canon of literature, be it Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, or Atharvaveda, 108 Upanishads, uh, Ramayana, and Mahabharata. They were all different genres. When we juxtapose Sanskritic canon literature with that of the Buddhist canonical literature, especially enshrined in the oral tradition of the Jataka stories. So, a brief history about the Jataka stories. So, the Jatakas, as part of Khuddaka Nikaya of Sutta Pitaka. So, Jataka stories are part of Buddhist Sutta Pitaka. So they were part of Khuddaka Nikaya of Sutta Pitaka. They narrate about 550 stories of Buddha, Buddha the Lord, but Buddha the saint, but Buddha the ascetic. So in every Jataka story, Buddha appears as an animal, as a king, or as a rescuer, but someone who sacrifices himself for the upliftment of the humankind, upliftment of the non-human kind. So human species and non-human species in Buddhist canon literature in the form of Jataka stories in Khuddaka Nikaya of Sutta Pitaka tells about rich environmental history uh, or environmental consciousness among ancient Indian people from 5th century BC to until 4th century AD. Though Jataka stories believed to have written down from 1st century AD onwards, their oral tradition goes back to from the time of Buddha himself, that is 5th century before Christ, or 5th century BCE. So roughly we can estimate, sir, what in point of time our lecture dwells concerning understanding early Indian consciousness towards in ecology, wildlife, vis-a-vis understanding human society, the sociological spectrum of the Indian society. That belongs to from 5th century before Christ to until 4th century AD. So that is the thing when we understand. As I've said that Jatakas originates from Khuddaka Nikaya of Sutta Pitaka of Buddhist canon. So these stories are divided into 22 nipatas containing gathas. Gathas means stories or a narrative anecdote of a particular event quoted in each story, which is usually narrated by Bodhisattva himself. So its commentaries, it's called Mulitika or Attakadas. Attakadas is a Pali term. Uh, Attakadas can be stated as like, Ardhakadas in Sanskrit. Attakadas. Sometimes I wonder the language, what you call Dravidian or Orient, were nothing but mere replications developed from Sanskrit and Pali. Most of the South Indian languages are very, very close to Pali. Telugu, my mother tongue, is very close to Pali. Whatever the words I find, 99% of the modern Telugu is Sanskritized from 12th century AD onwards. But when I read Telugu texts, there were a lot of, uses, daily uses of the language. It has close proximity to Pali and Prakrit. So this is one thing that struck me, the thing called Attakadas in Jataka stories, which were commentaries, and they are known as Jataka Varnana. So today's lecture explains Jatakas characterizing animals, trees, and tree spirits. So there is a eco-spirituality embedded in the philosophy of philosophical teachings of Buddhism from the rubric of Jataka stories. Then sacrifices as a source of environmental virtues. Some of the bodhisattvas, as king or animal, sacrifice themselves out of compassion, as depicted in Jataka stories. So in each Jataka, there is a reincarnation of bodhisattva as an animal or as a king or as an elephant or as a monkey or as a tiger. Sometimes, as an ascetic. In one Jataka story, Buddha sacrifices himself because a tiger was hungry. It has some tiger cubs. So it was this was a famine time. There were no villages nearby. It was a famine happening inside of a forest, a vana, on the periphery. So this tiger was hungry. So Buddha, as a bodhisattva, looks at this hungry tigress, which need to feed its cubs. So he himself goes an ascetic. He becomes the meal for the tigress. So the tigress consumes Buddha's body to satiate its hunger, uh, hunger. So tiger, Buddha becomes a meal for a tiger to save the animal's life, to fill the appetite, hunger of this particular animal during the time of famine. So look at it, the virtuosity of philosophy of Buddhism embedded in the Jataka stories. The Jatakas demonstrate the wild species and forest trees have the right to coexist with human beings. So this is it's so striking in terms of its moral canon, but also philosophical virtues of environment. That human species were not superior to uh, forest trees or wild species. Human and non-human world were juxtaposed in similar fashion in Buddhist canon of philosophy, in Buddhist teachings, in Jataka stories of Sutta Pitaka. The wisdom, uh, perspicacity, and prescience of ideas mentioned in the Jatakas should be given due importance and attention as they deserve in the formation of environmental ethics. So, what is the conclusion we can draw after studying uh, different Jataka stories that we are going to explore in today's 2 hour lecture. So, environmental ethics as a method of history can be traced back to 5th century BC. What was the context? These Jatakas were born or composed or told or articulated or narrated uh, from 5th century before Christ to until the end of the Mauryan period, later taken by Kushanas to be writing down in inscriptions, in Gandhara art, but also in the Satavahana period in Andhra, what is today's Andhra and Telangana and Maharashtra and Gujarat. It tells about the, you know, how Buddhist worldview was giving reverence to environment. Sometimes we wonder, so we are living in modern world. We talk about pollution, pollution in Delhi, pollution in big cities like Bombay, even in Hyderabad. The city I come from, Visakhapatnam, has 51 red industries. So as an environmental historian or as an ecologist, I would be concerned about the way we are very modernized. Hyderabad city has lots of flyover bridges. Delhi also has. When you go to New Delhi International Airport, you have to go through the flyover, right? When I was at the Timothy Library, then Delhi has a lot of pollution. Um, I was in Manchester. Manchester was once uh, where industrial revolution was born. It's the center of industrial revolution during latter part of the 18th century to early part of the 19th century. That is around 1770s to 1830s and 1840s. So when I went to Manchester in 2005, stayed there for 7 years, it was full of green belt. Now we cannot find a single pollutant industry in Manchester. What was so polluted? Full of industrial revolution, smoke belching factories, uh, poverty, child labor, now turned into full of green belt. We used to go for hiking. Peak District is nearby. Lake District, the poetry, environmental poetry you can find in Walter Scott's writings is not far away. It's just 1 hour, 30 minutes away by drive from Manchester. So it's a full of aesthetic beauty. Sometimes I compare my time, my 7 years of time in Manchester with my time in India. One thing is environmentalism is very discernible. You have spring. In spring, you get lots of lotus blossom, cherry blooming. Then in summer, it's full greenish. Then it follows by rain. Then turns autumn around the month of October and November. Autumn is the beautiful part of United Kingdom or any European or North American ambience. If you look at it as an environmentalist and ecologist, gold leaves, pink leaves. You look at the shades of colors that I only saw not in Delhi, not in Visakhapatnam, not in Hyderabad. But when I was passing through the train between Visakhapatnam and Delhi uh, in the central provinces, what is today's Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, there I found uh, trees with golden leaves, pink colored, with bright all sorts of colors. This interest in environment. So it struck me. But these golden leaves were appearing in central provinces of India, what is today's Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh were blossoming in the month of spring. That was March and April. But in Manchester, you can find those colors. Spring is full of blossoming of very very big roses, tulips, daffodils. Daffodils, tulips, cherries will not survive in tropical climate. You might wonder why our university did not plant tulips or daffodils or cherry trees as Japanese or North American and European climates support these kind of tree and plant species because ours is a tropical climate. So they wouldn't survive. But surprisingly, these flavors can be figured out in ancient literature. If you read Ramayana and Mahabharata, swans, different species of birds which no longer exist because the snow-clad mountains were there in the northern part of India, Himalayas were nearby, swans were numerous in the time of early Vedic and later Vedic period. So it tells about, you know, a different kind of environment existed once upon a time in early India that we no longer have in this to witness them our own eyes. So now we are discussing about this Buddhist attitudes towards environment. So Buddhism's history is one of its unique kind, adaptation and evolution in early India. So it also tells about how Buddhism as a kind of philosophical movement, if not a religious movement. It was not necessarily an ecclesiastic. It later turned into ecclesiastic style of movement with Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhist philosophy by turn of the first century AD. But when Buddha himself was preaching, uh, their surroundings were filled with forest, wildlife, ponds, lakes, snow-clad mountains. It is full of wildlife. 80% of India around 5th century BC was full of forest, full of wild beasts. And interestingly, Buddhism developed a unique kind of philosophy that compassion towards non-human species. This is the crux of environmental ethics, environmental philosophy we can find in Jataka stories. I will give you a lot of interesting Jataka stories, but let us discuss about the theoretical, conceptual uh, understanding of Jataka stories before we go into anecdotal or empirical details of each story. I will give you two or three very, very interesting Jataka stories to illustrate their environmental consciousness, their reverence for wildlife, their empathy towards different kind of non-human species. So it also called, we can, another way of, theorizing Jataka stories in relation to understanding ancient Indian environment and ecology. This is wildlife was anthropomorphic environmentalism. This is the method I am using. I invented this term. I'm using anthropomorphic environmentalism is the one way of methodology in examining Jataka canon of Sutta Pitaka from Buddhist literature. Then, uh, I call it Buddhism's history is one of its kind. This unfolding phenomenon called Buddhism has taken place for over 2 millennia, 2000 years throughout Asia. As Buddhism adapted to diverse cultures and their varied environments, wherever Buddhism went, it was born in Magadha, what is today's Bihar, where Nalanda University is located. It went everywhere. It went to Bhutan, it went to China, it went to Myanmar, it went to Thailand, Indonesia, Forest Asia, Japan. Whole Forest Asia was Korea, South Korea, North Korea. Everywhere we can find the imprints and impact of Buddhism since last 2,500 years. So Buddhism thus becomes an integral part of cultures in the tropical climates of South and Southeast Asia. That is our Indian subcontinent, but forest nations like Thailand, Indonesia, Myanmar, Bhutan, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and China. So the highest plateaus of and mountains of Tibet and the varied environments of China, Korea, and Japan. So how have these environmental contexts affected the Buddhist philosophy of environment? Is there a common thread in the way Buddhists understood the link between ecology and human society? So when we look at Buddhism, it tells about one interesting thing. Their understanding of human life was closely linked with understanding of their immediate environment. So there is another interesting background. Look at the latter Vedic case. Buddha was always against bloodthirsty rituals of later Vedic age in other Veda. Other Veda, if anyone reads other Veda, it's lots of animal sacrifices. So later Vedic people were killing wild animals and sacrificing in the altar of fire uh, to please Agni, to please Devatas, the demigods, to please Indra, to please Vishnu or Varuna or any god, Shiva. Shakti came later. So Buddha was fed up. Why these people were killing animals unnecessarily? Deer, stags, sambar, tigers, lions, horses, cows, all were sacrificed in the altar fire of the Vedic rituals of the Samaveda, but also other Veda and Yajurveda. So later Vedic period is tells about formation of the state into state-making process. Though Professor Romila Thapar tells about 6th century BC as the state-making process, we can trace back to the time of the Ramayana and Mahabharata. That was 12th century BC to 10th century BC. So these Vedic rituals were unnecessarily killing lots of wild species. If you kill a deer in order to survive, to feed your hunger, then it's okay. Buddha was okay with that. But these people were killing animals in excess. What, like, British were killing tigers, elephants, deer, birds, wild pigs, crocodiles, rhinos, all kinds of beautiful rich fauna of wildlife was totally annihilated during the British time. Vedic people didn't have the control. Vedic Aryans, when they entered from northwestern part of India, did not have the total control of India at the time. So they called in Rigveda a Jambu Dvipa, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Gujarat to northeastern part of Nagaland and Mizoram. This that was only some monks went faraway places and they composed this ideal type of the geographical notion of Jambudvipa. But most of the Aryabharta was located in northern part of India, from Saptasindhu Valley to Yamuna, Ganga, Do. That was the geographical limitation of the early Vedic kingdoms. So they were sacrificing animals, and Buddha uh, made an objection to this. So this was the core reason behind development of the rationalist philosophy concerning condemnation of the Vedic rituals, condemnation of the bloody sacrifices, but giving a kind of reverence, a kind of moral and philosophical value to the wild species, but also tree species in Buddhist canon of philosophy, in Buddhist canon of teaching. So why Buddha was preaching? So origin goes back to 5th century BC, when Buddha himself was developing this kind of environmental consciousness. So the natural world, what is we call as Indian ecology or Indian environment, in early India echoes prominently in the Buddhist conception of humanity. Perhaps in part because the very transformation of the natural environment in which it was born. So when we look at the development of natural world in tandem with the development of the human societies. So this is where Buddhist philosophy came to the fore. So it born out of their experience living in the midst of the natural environment, living in the midst of the wild species, living in the midst of the villages and towns. So Bhikkhu was the one uh, believed to have composed these Jataka stories. Bhikkhus were nothing but Buddhist monks. After Buddha had 22 disciples, they went everywhere. Buddha sent them, even Ashoka, the Mauryan emperor, sent Buddhist emissaries to China, but also to Sri Lanka, to the south of India. Some of the Aryan community migrated towards south. What became Sangam literature? Sangam literature, again, they were references to these Buddhist kind of secular philosophy. which was different from Sanskritic influence of Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar, or anything. Then in Sri Lanka is a Buddhist country, right? So their Buddhism goes back to as early as 3rd century before Christ, when Emperor Ashoka sent his son and daughter and some of his relatives as emissaries to spread Buddhism. So this is where we can find how Buddhism emerged as a unique philosophy, different from the genre of the Sanskrit literature. And it was closely appreciative of the early Indian environment. As we shall see, while natural environment as a value in and of itself may not have played a major role in the development of early Buddhist thought and practice, it was a necessary component of the tradition's articulation of an ecology of human flourishing. So, human development of philosophical thinking, human development of intellectual nourishment, uh, were based on a coexistence with ecology and wildlife. So this is the chief component of Buddhist philosophy that we can trace from studying the Jataka stories. Let me give one stanza from this Jataka stories, one of the Buddhist Mahayana philosophy. Let creatures all things that live, all beings of whatever kind, see nothing that will bore them may no evil come to them. So, whether you were a tiger, whether you were a swan, whether you were an elephant, whether you were a king, whether you were a carpenter, whether you were an ordinary person, whether you're a poor man or a rich man, no evil come to any living creature. So, this is the poem composed by one of the Buddhist monk called Kullavaka. Kullavaka is the disciple of Buddha. So this was composed around 4th century before Christ. So no evil come to any creature. Everyone wants to live. Tiger wants to live his full life. I want to live my full life. You want to live your full life. A king wants to live full life. No one wants to have diseases or any kind of sorrow, tragedy struck in our family, to our family members, to our brothers or to our sisters, to our mother or our father, or our relatives, or our beloved friends. So, Buddhist philosophy emphasizes value towards life. So, this value to the life was told in the form of anthropomorphic narratives. So, animals represent human characteristics. So, animals have feelings, animals have morals, animals also have immorality. So, this is the crux of understanding Buddhist philosophy through Jatakas stories. Then, in today's lecture, then we are going to explore how Buddhist attitudes and philosophy in early India looked at ecology and wildlife through anthropomorphism. So, what I call, we can conclude from study of the Buddhist philosophy in relation to understanding Indian ecology and wildlife can be conceptualized, theorized as anthropomorphic environmentalism, beginning with references in early Buddhist teachings to environment, both in birth stories of the Buddha and in the course of behavior. For forest monks, we shall walk around the varied ways that the environment and ecology was viewed and integrated into Buddhist philosophy of life, where environment was integral part of human sustenance. Pali canon of Buddhist literature is crucial to uncover a full-fledged philosophy of life, reflecting all aspects of experience, including the Buddhist attitudes towards environment, landscapes, water bodies, and wildlife. So, Buddhist Jataka stories offers a rich canon of understanding um, eco-philosophy of life, but eco-philosophy of environment, eco-philosophy of reverence to wild species or non-human rule. Uh, you have to respect an elephant. It will not disturb you. You have to respect a tiger. If you mind your own business, this kind of philosophy can be found even some of the Adivasi traditions. One of the controversy concerning the Jataka stories was it's not necessarily a unique philosophical formulation coming from the thinking and thought processes of the Buddhist monks. They were borrowed from local oral traditions. It could be from local people. It could be from the forest dwellers whom the Buddhist monk, the bhikkhu, interacted while moving in the forest, then incorporated into Prakrut or Pali oral tradition and composed a narrative. Because this bhikkhu roams around town, then he goes to villages. So Grama and Aranya were centers of life in bhikkhu's day-to-day existence. So he was interacting with the city and civilization, but also forest and environment. So this is how they composed the Jataka stories. Then there is interesting thing about the Jataka stories is dyad. Dyad is another kind of methodological framework in understanding Buddhist philosophy in relation to Indian environment. Can anyone tell what is a dyad? It's a sociological methodological framework that is employed in sociology. Dyad. Some is a Uma Chakravarti student is there? Someone who did from EU or JNU? Anyone studied under Professor Uma Chakravarti? Yes?
No, sir.
Okay. But dyad is a kind of, a relationship between the two. It could be between animals, between mother and father, between siblings, between your sister and yourself, between your brother and yourself, between any two objects. So this is a methodology employed in the discipline of sociology, but it is also valuable in studying Buddhism as well. So dyad is a kind of relationship between two components. It could be humans, it could be non-humans. Interestingly, Jataka stories employs in relation to animals. So these animal characters in the form of a lion or a lioness, in the form of a jackal, in the form of an elephant, in the form of bull, speaks about the so-called dyad relationship. It was employed by one of the historian called Brenda Beck, I think. Brenda Beck had written about dyad as a methodological tool to study, to uncover the history of society, which were told in the form of animal stories. But animal kingdom was intrinsically linked with human way of life. So, environmentalism, anthropomorphic environmentalism, these are the theories I'm creating out of our lecture. But Buddhist for Buddhist, it was a natural thing. So I'm using our academic intelligence to construct these theories and conceptualizations. For Buddhist, they were not into this business. Buddhist monks were just roaming. They might happen to see a tiger. It didn't attack them. They might have observed some of the uh, characteristics of the animals, or they might have borrowed stories from Vanavasis, forest dwellers, or hunter-gatherer communities living inside of the forest. Then they incorporated into Pali canon of Nikayas, uh, where Jataka stories come from. So that they observed that tiger was very ferocious and an honorable beast. But this kind of tradition can be found even in the Baiga oral tradition, Gondi oral tradition. So Jataka stories were sometimes highest in their intellectual framework, but also borrowed some of their anecdotal evidence coming from forest people. So I'm a historian who had studied about the Baiga Adivasi way of life in relation to their hunting cultures and immediate environment, but also the goals. So I came across the similarities when I was looking at my lecture notes yesterday night between how Buddhist monks were looking at wildlife in relation to the society. Some animals were given highest regard. Some animals were given lowest regard. So there was also criticism concerning how animals were depicted. Uh, there is also limitation for animals as a representation of virtues and vices in the Jataka stories. So if we look at all these 550 Jataka stories, different animals were given many references. Uh, Monkeys were most described in the Jataka stories. There were 27 references associated, or 27 references were associated with the monkeys. Elephants were given almost 24 references, jackals 20 references, lions 19 times, crows 17 times. Uh, and there is a criticism also. There were scholars who had written about Jataka stories, such as James Whitall, Uma Chakrabarti. There is also one professor from Delhi University. She had written one wonderful thing about environmental philosophy in the Jataka stories. Her name is Pragati Sahni. So these were some of the things written by some of the scholars concerning understanding of the Pali sources. That is the Jataka oral tradition. So how animals were represented through form of anthropomorphic environmentalism of vice and virtue. Some animals represent virtues of environment, virtues of life. According to Jataka stories, is not human life. Life as in a living organism is a biodiversity. Biodiversity was richly depicted in the Buddhist canon of literature through Jataka stories. Biodiversity. Your life is as important as my life. I'm an elephant. So my life is important as a human. I'm a tiger. My life is as important as anyone. So human life not alone is superior, but other living organisms too were equal on par with the humans is the core environmental philosophy of the Jataka story. But they tell also about virtues of an animal, vices of an animal. Vice and virtue were beautifully and philosophically, morally depicted through Jataka stories. I will give some narration. But there is one criticism before going to tell about some of the Jataka stories. One of the historian, Waldau, contends that the Jataka stories lack real substance about animals, and some animals are depicted in a negative manner, like monkeys that lack wisdom and any sort of understanding. If a child goes like mad priest or a mad playboy, uh, destroying all the you know belongings in the house, parents will get angry, and the child was called as this monkey boy or monkey girl. So monkeys were depicted in a negative limelight. So this historian Waldo finds this problematic when studying the Jataka stories. Monkeys were given a negative representation without their fault. So by look at Darwin's theory of origin of species. By species design, monkeys were tend to behave like that without any organization. They destroy. Sometimes they attack. If you were in Teen Murti library, I don't know. I was going to canteen one day with my fellow junior fellow. We were two postdocs, and a monkey was trying to attack us. So we ran. We were quite fit. I think if you were some old person, some old lady or old man, it could have injured that person. So it was trying to attack us. So we ran inside of the canteen, shut the door. So in that way, we escaped the monkey attack. So monkeys are mischievous, right? So Buddhist Jataka stories depicts a kind of negative uh, kind of vice attributed to if you're mischievous, if you're not caring about morals, how to respect elders, how to respect Babi and Baya or sister and brother-in-law. Uh, I mean, Didi and Raji, what kind of thing. So these were also depicted through animal anthropomorphic characters in Jataka stories. That's the interesting thing about this Buddhist philosophy. But this particular scholar, Waldo, contends that Jataka stories lack real substance. Monkeys themselves were designed in such a way through biodiversity framework. So we cannot expect them to have any wisdom or any kind of intellectual understanding. Then he says that the real attributes of animals have not been explored, and anthropomorphic portrayals of animals have been done to substantiate the moral of the story. It was human understanding of the animal, that human as having the thinking capability, trying to impose our own consciousness through animal characters. This is called anthropomorphism. Rather than animals were trying to impose their character onto humans. So this is the limitation in understanding the Jataka stories. It's the human anthropomorphism that was depicted through animal characters rather than a tiger or an elephant or a crocodile or a rhino or a swan or a geese or goose, singular, imposing their way of life onto us. So it's the humans, Buddhist monks, bhikkhu, as a peripatetic entity, negotiating between grama, town, village, but also aranya, the forest, creating all these sorts of stories. He might have seen a tiger 1 hour ago. Then he walked 3, 4 hours towards a village. Then he must have seen a quarrel between a wife and husband, between a mother in law and daughter in law. So he also looked at some two animals, two deer, sambar stags fighting in the forest for a female stag. So he was actually bringing these, forest life and civilized life into his understanding of composing a Jataka story. Here he was looking at human species and non-human species from philosophical mind of Buddhism. These are creatures. These were human creatures. These were wild creatures. They were fighting. These humans were also fighting. So that was the moral basis of composing a Jataka story. And environment was very rich. Look at it. Wild species were juxtaposed with human species. Humans have highest kind of intellect. But in those times, we didn't have technology. We didn't have enlightenment movement. We didn't have Renaissance, Reformation, any kind of so, but still, it's an Enlightenment philosophy in the context of condemning later Vedic period and placing wild species, but also the natural environment on par with the human life. So humans have no right to kill others without any reason. If you want, if you're hungry, you can kill an animal, a deer or a rabbit. You can sustain yourself. But excessive killing in the name of offering obeisances to God is unacceptable in the Buddhist philosophy. This is what Jataka stories also tell. Then this Waldo, another interesting thing. Waldo further opens that the references of elephants found in Buddhism are not benign in understanding the realities of the real world animal. The same kind of argument could be framed for other animals who are socially complex, large brained, and intelligent animals, but depicted or treated as bad. So, this is one limitation of how elephants sometimes were shown. I'll give you one elephant story which negotiates between a carpenter and a king. In the end, this was a white elephant. It was called white elephant. It must be red elephants. Red elephants were there in Indochina kind of forest. uh, they were called as white. I don't know why Aryan, these people were referring whatever animal was magnificent, they used to call it white. So this white elephant negotiates between saving a poor carpenter's family by selling itself to the king. The king wants this magnificent elephant. So one day, this elephant was struck with some kind of needle, some kind of wood into its food. So it was full of agony, and it was a beautiful uh, female elephant. It was called white elephant, but it's a beautiful, magnificent elephant, which was very tall, 6, 8 feet tall, with large trunks and with a magnificent, healthy body. But some kind of wood struck its feet. So it goes to nearby village, in the buffer zone of a village and the forest. So the carpenters, out of kindness, removes that injury, that injured elephant, that wood. So the elephant visits every day to this group of carpenters. So they feed this animal every day. So it slowly heals from the crampling of the feet to a full-fledged fit elephant in 3 months of time. So then it also gives a calf, which becomes quite young. It also looks very magnificent. Then what happens that the carpenters were poor. They have wives, they have children. So their business was very, very, not good. It's troublesome. One day they get some order. In a week, they wouldn't get any order. So they were leading a poor, miserable life. So one day, the king of this nearby kingdom comes and visits this buffer zone and asks the carpenters, "You have to give this elephant to us." Carpenter says okay because he was king of their polity. They cannot say no to him. But the elephant refuses to go unless you give a house and lump sum gold coins to this group of carpenters' families. I will not come to you. So this is the argument made by the elephant. So elephant was making an intelligent negotiating skill between the king and the carpenters. King would have taken it freely, but it was the elephant who refused to go with the king unless he gives. Then kings give hundreds of gold coins, silver coins, and he also builds a beautiful home, like palace for all group of carpenters' family. Then king says that let us go. You come with me, the elephant. Still that the elephant, this white elephant refused to go. Now I'm not satisfied. You gave home, you gave gold coins, you gave silver coins, you built them house, but please also provide them some food items, but also good clothes to carpenters' wives and carpenters' children. Then king accords that as well. So finally, after elephant got satisfied that carpenters received a proper home, clothes, ornaments, food, everything that would sustain even their grandchildren. That much of amount this elephant negotiated because it was saved by carpenters once upon a time, some 10, 15 years ago. And it grew along attached to that, those carpenters. So carpenters were voiceless. Here, humans were depicted as voiceless subjects under the kingship of a rich man. That was the emperor himself or the king himself. Anyone can buy. Look at Ambani or Ratan Tata. They can buy patches of land at a fraction of cost because they have billions of dollars. For us, we have to labor our whole life. We cannot even buy a three-bedroom flat, which would cost 1 crore, especially in Hyderabad. If you want to buy a Mercedes-Benz car or Audi, for an academic, it's impossible unless you are a professor at some Ivy League university like Toronto. Um, so this is the for middle classes, it's a bit a struggle. Why we don't buy big cars? Because we have to educate our children, our daughters, our sons. So money has to be saved. Money has to be saved for the survival of our kith and kin, our children, our daughters, our sons, our granddaughters, our grandsons. So, keeping in that mind, we always keep savings without spending on luxury items. So that is so here King was a rich man like Ambani or a Ratan Tata, so or Jeff Bezos, so he can purchase whatever he wants. But here, elephant as a expensive item, a luxurious item. It felt like I am like Mercedes Maybach car. So unless you give, uh, you know, portion of money that would sustain great great grandchildren of these carpenters' families, I wouldn't come to you. So elephant was the savior. Who was this elephant in this Jataka story? It was Buddha himself, the God Buddha himself, incarnated as an elephant, as an intelligent species, a wild species, saving the voiceless humans in this Jataka story. But it also tells that in the end, the elephant even cannot contest the political authority, the opulence of the king. King ultimately buys that elephant because he felt that whatever is magnificent in my kingdom, be it a royal tiger, be it a royal elephant, that should live in my court, in my palace. This is the authoritative governance of a king, which ultimately brought even the intelligent elephant under his control. But here, this intelligent elephant plays a negotiating role in saving the voiceless carpenter family. So, this is the beauty of Jataka. Look at it. Animal, anthropomorphism came to the fore. A voiceless animal saving, uh, a intelligent animal saving a voiceless carpenter families in a village in one of the kingdom in northern part of India around 4th century before Christ. So it tells this is very interesting. So other thing is about captive elephants. What was the other way of elephant representation? Uh, 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 when they were captured. In the history of war elephants, written by Thomas Trotman, or Gaja Shastra, which was written in the 6th century BC, Aryans employed elephants as war machines to conquer, to defeat other kings, but to also fight people like Alexander the Great, Seleucus Nicator. Alexander was animated when he defeated Porus, the Purushottama of India, what is today's Punjab kingdom. Uh, Porus was not killed. Porus elephant actually fought valiantly against the Greek forces. It destroyed the cavalry and infantry, hundreds of Greek soldiers and armament. So this fascinated Alexander the Great. He asked, whose elephant was that? Then the Greek general tells that it was King Purushottam's elephant. It's the elephant of this particular local king, Porus. Oh, this elephant fought very bravely. And then he asks Porus whether he can gift that elephant for him. Then Porus agrees. So, because of the good manner of the Porus, Alexander decided not to kill Porus, despite he was taken as a prisoner. Then later, Porus was appointed as local governor of the this Alexander's the Great Empire as a local satrap, local chieftain. But the elephant was later taken by Alexander back to along with him to Greece. But Alexander dies on the way. That's a different story. But Alexander dedicates this elephant to sun god and names it Ajax. So ancient Aryans also in Indo-Aryans worshipped sun god. You have Akshupanishad, you have Suryopanishad. These are the beautiful Sanskrit stanzas eulogizing, offering oddies to in praise of sun god. So Alexander was dedicated this elephant to Greek sun god and named it Ajax. So look at how Greek generals, the great military ruler and military commander, uh, the figure Alexander also was impressed by the Indian warrior elephant. So this is the kind of depiction of war elephant uh, anthropomorphism in relation to military history and political understanding of state interaction between different states, such as in Greeks and Indians, comes in the form of how elephant was donated, and it was dedicated to Greek sun god and named Ajax. But in Buddhism, this story is different. Here, this elephant was not representing the elite history. It was representing the common struggle of a carpenter, saving the group of carpenters' lives, the lives of their wives and their children by negotiating with one of the richest Indian king around this time, prior to the emergence of the Mauryan Empire. So look at, so Jataka stories offers a common subaltern perspective of understanding history in opposition to the elite history of war elephants that can be found in the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, but also in Gaja Shastra or 6th century BC and so on. So here, uh, the war elephant history that we can find in Sanskrit texts do not tell about sufferings of elephants, but Buddhist Jatakas do. So that is the interesting thing, how elephants were having their own dignity and wisdom. So, in one of the Jataka stories, what is called Dubbala Katta Jataka. In the Dubbala Katta Jataka, the Bodhisattva is a tree spirit living in the Himalayas. When an elephant, unable to bear the excruciating pain inflicted upon him during the training and rehabilitation, Kedda operation, Kedda operation was one of the strongest kind of method of capturing elephants, method of capturing wild elephants and tame them and train them. So they dig a pit. So in search of arms, the wild elephant fell down. Sometimes they were, you know, they were lured by female tamed elephants. But so wild elephant goes phenomenal torture because you were in the wild. You roam free. Suddenly you were under the clutches of the humans. You have to listen to human language, human instructions. Your legs were chained with these iron, whatever that thing, iron clutches. So it agonizes your mind. Till yesterday, you roamed free. Today, I'm imprisoned uh, under the control of these human beings. They're making me to work. They're asking me to fell down a tree. I have to carry large sums of forest wood over 10, 20 kilometers every day. So I have to do so much labor under my human masters. So one day one elephant ran away with excruciating. It got fed up with the rehabilitation work, instructions given by its human masters and so on. Then it ran towards the upper Himalayas, what is today's Sivalik Hills. This elephant must be living in what is near to Magadha, what is today's Bihar. It ran to Indo-Nepal border, to Sivalik Mountains, snow-clad mountains. Then Buddha in this particular Jataka called Dubbala Katta Jataka or Dubbala Kada Jataka. It became, Bodhisattva becomes a tree spirit. So this elephant was unable to bear excruciating pain inflicted upon him during the taming and rehabilitation. He broke free and fled to the Himalayas and wandered in constant fear. Uh, Even though this elephant escaped from human masters, it was totally under constant fear. They might come back in search of me. They might again imprison me with those iron clutches. I may again be tortured. I may be asked to do lots of heavy loads of work by them. So though it got free, it escaped to that kind of slavery and imprisonment from the human control and roaming inside of the forest near the Himalayas. Elephant was psychologically depressed. So it tells about, animals do have feelings. Animals have the same feelings. If I were a Guantanamo prisoner under George W. Bush, like an Iraqi prisoner, what would be my condition? I will be in constant fear. I'll get shell shocked. At Manchester, I was teaching war in history for BA undergraduates. There is a phenomenon called shell shock. What is shell shock in First World War and Second World War? When Britain and Europeans fought Germans, the Third Reich under Hitler during the Second World War. Shell shock was the bombardment. You take your machine guns, but German planes were bombing above. London was bombed. Parts of Scotland were bombed by Hitler. So any soldier fighting against the Allied, on the part of Allied troops against the Nazi forces, undergo this kind of shell shock. So war was over. Hitler was killed himself. He committed suicide without being captured. Roosevelt and Churchill declared that we won the war. But it's a combined effort. It's not the individual victory of Winston Churchill or Frederick D. Roosevelt. But Americans also bombed Germany. Innocent Germans died. Lakhs, millions of Europeans have died on both sides because of the this pig-headedness of dictators like Hitler and Mussolini. So, but soldiers who were they were young people, sometimes as old as 13, 15-year-old boys were recruited as child soldiers in Hitler's army, but also in British army. So every child over 15 was expected to join British army to fight against Third Reich and Hitler. So they get to this kind of psychological trauma. You never touched a gun. You wanted to have some kind of feminine companionship of your mom, enjoying the company of your sister. So these are what? These are the aesthetic sentimentalities of life. A male child wants the company of the females, like mom, sister. It makes him happy as a child when you were in teenagers. So he was denied that kind of life, wanted to lead a masculine militaristic thing, which was not expected of him at that age because of the unexpected circumstances called war. War destroyed thousands, millions of families in Britain, across Europe, in Germany, in France, in Czechoslovakia, in Poland, everywhere in Russia. So shell shock was what you experienced as a soldier or the child soldier. You got saved. Now Hitler died. So whomever the surviving soldiers returned to their respective villages in Scotland, in England, in Wales, in Ireland, in France. So, but they had that psychological trauma. Whenever they sleep in the night, they feel it. Oh, suddenly they woke up. They got a bad dream. They were shivering because somehow they had a bomb, sound of a bomb, or an aerial bombing, an aeroplane drop bomb on a camp of the soldiers fighting against Hitler, a German aeroplane. So even though they turned 80 years until their death, this shell shock never went away. So this is Professor Anna Cordon Coyne's teaching at University of Manchester, which I was teaching as this particular uh, episode of shell shock for Manchester University BA undergraduates. So, what is this captured elephant? It was having similar kind of psychological trauma. So, psychoanalytical history is very important. That's what we were discussing yesterday, right? As part of the Arnold School of Method of psychological feeling, psychological trauma, fear in history, anxiety in history. These are the methods we have to employ. We are humans. History is based on facts, but history is a human science. It's not statistics. It's not Mercedes Benz engineering or Audi engineering. We are not machines. We are human beings. We have prejudices. We have fables. We developed a taste and liking for certain things, dislike for other things. So the shell shock was one phenomenon that was studied during First World War and Second World War among soldiers of the Allied forces, but it must have existed even among Germans. Indian soldiers too did contribute in support of the British warfare. One Oxford professor had written a beautiful book about Indian soldiers' experience on French frontier on behalf of the British when they were fighting against the Third Reich and Hitler. So this elephant's experience was like similar. So look at it. A Jataka story can give a rich history as good as of a soldier, a British soldier fighting in the Second World War, an Indian soldier fighting in the Second World War, an Australian soldier fighting in the Second War. Now, Bodhisattva here emerges as um, a tree spirit living in the Himalaya. Since this elephant was fearing all the time, the Bodhisattva, as a tree spirit, shows compassionate for him, and after his advice, the elephant fears no more. So this is the beautiful thing that was embedded in the Jataka stories. So here, what in the form of tree, he advises, dear elephant, I am Bodhisattva, and in this forest, no human can enter inside of this forest. No one will take away. So, in the form of a tree, Bodhisattva gives is divine bestowment, divine blessings onto this elephant, which was full of apprehension, anxiety, and panic attack. The moment the tree gives that bestowment, that elephant becomes calm and it realizes that it was now liberated soul. So it roams the rest of life for the next 30, 35 years. Elephant has a lifespan of 60, 70 years, right? So rest of 35 years, it lives in peace because of the how forest offered a sanctuary. So forest here was again offering a sanctuary not for humans alone, like in the Upanishadic period. Upanishadic philosophy was the basis of the birth of Jainism and Buddhism. They condemn Vedic rituals. They take sanctuary uh, against in the forest, against the material excessiveness of the civilized life. So in forest, you can look at trees, you can look at swans, you can look at peafoods, you can look at beautiful lake, snow-clad mountains, tigers, all kind of thing. So here tigers, despite their predatory nature, were depicted as friends in the Jataka stories. The same in the Upanishadic philosophy. They must have some kind of understanding how humans can coexist with wild species despite their predatory nature. Then, so what does Jatakas ultimately tell? The Jatakas endorse that ethics, law, and economics should not only be accountable for material progress, but also for the protecting rights of animals and forest. So this is the core philosophy we can draw. Law and economics were also embedded. The way this particular intelligent species, the elephant, saved carpenter's family. In another story, I think a horse saves an old woman. So this young horse was brought up by one old woman, and it reaches a certain age. So a merchant needs this particular horse. So he asked this old woman, if you sell this horse, I will give you the money. But old woman was nurturing this horse nearly for 8 years. So she doesn't want to be separated from this particular animal. But that merchant convinces that old woman that this is a well-built, physically fit horse. It looks very beautiful. I want this, and I'll give you a money that will sustain you till end of his life. She was poor. Then horse convinces again this old woman that let me be sold to this particular merchant. You take the money. You cannot feed me every day. You became old. And if I get sold to this merchant, you have this enough of money. You will have servants to look after you, to cook, to clean, to wash your clothes and all. So horses finally convinces her foster mother, the old woman, to be sold to that particular merchant. So here you can see how the rich people were intervening to buy the poor because they want something that is luxurious, that looks spectacular, that looks magnificent. So these were two depicted in the Jataka stories of the elephant and horse. Both were the saviors of the voiceless humans. In the case of elephant, the carpenter's family. In the case of this particular horse story, the old woman. In this rich merchant buys this horse, the king buys the elephant. So look at how humans, animals were anthropomorphized as powerful negotiators when rich people were trying to dominate through their political but economic authority. That was beautifully depicted in the Jataka stories. Then, what is the other way of studying the many layers of the Jataka stories? Uh, this is the, one is the rejection of Sanskrit. Bhikkhus and Buddha himself was embracing Pali as the spoken language of ancient Indian people. So the Buddhist worldview may be summed up as an emphasis on the rejection of the climb of the Brahmanas to social and intellectual preeminence based on birth. and the advocacy of acquired spiritual merit, potentially available to all who are willing to strive for it in its stead. So Buddhist rejected uh, the you know the dominance of the Brahmin or Kshatriya. You can acquire merit. So this merit can be seen even in the form of an animal. An animal has a better merit than a Brahman or a Kshatriya. So that is the thing that was told in the form of the elephant story and the horse story. Then there is also the notion of karma, but also sometimes contravening hierarchies. Jatakas again adhering to that you cannot cross uh, limits of the society. So it appears to us that at least some of the narratives in the Jatakas, where the subordinate classes are represented sometimes with a sensibility, which is suggestive of emanating from experience, pointing to the social creativity of the so-called inarticulate so-called inarticulate word represented through animal stories. I will give this man, woman, and beast in the Jatakas. It was actually written by Professor uh, um, Uma Chakravarti, but I also bring Brenda back into this context. How this is a new coding approach of anthropomorphic environmentalism and ethics of living organisms. I use living organisms because Jataka stories not only speaks about human world, they speak about animal world, they speak about forest, they speak about powers to the forest. I will give two more narratives in the end, but let me give you some interesting stories of the Brenda Beck uh, concerning her methodological approach called social dyad. So, a social dyad involves any two characters or any two components in the story taken as a pair, and it makes that relationship a primary unit of study. So, an interaction between an animal or a human, as was the case with the horse, uh, the old woman, and the merchant, as was the case of the elephant, carpenters' families, and the king. So, this is the dyad as a methodological framework of studying ancient Indian social history, but also environmental history. So sometimes it's very interesting, it's contradictory as well. So, for example, the body size of the animal involved is often a key issue, and there are many stories where a jackal is placed in a dyadic relationship with a large, violent animal such as a lion. So this is one thing. Social hierarchy was beautifully uh, depicted through anthropomorphic environmentalism in the Jataka stories. So this tells about a hierarchical situation. And many stories in the Jatakas project negative feelings about exploitation of a weak or inferior partner and display support of the underdog, quite unlike the social norm. So folk tales, stories of Jatakas uh, against superiors are often depicted as avoiding open confrontation and taken recourse to deception and cheating, especially in the case of animals. So here I will give the story of a lion and uh, what is that animal? Jackal. As diodes involving uh, an animal. Uh, it tells about one jackal approaches a particular female lion. So it got astounded by the beauty of this particular female lion. So it proposes that, you know, oh, lioness, you and I look, we were four-legged. So this jackal got impressed with the beauty of this lioness. So it proposes the lioness, you were four-legged, I'm also four-legged. But lion was a big, big animal. This jackal is a very small animal. So jackal makes a proposal to lioness. And what is the thing I'm just getting? It's a very humorous story, but it has a moral of story of the class hierarchy. Then the lioness get embarrassed the moment it got proposed by this jackal. Oh, it is such an insult that this jackal is appreciating my beauty. That is okay. But the jackal looks very small and I'm a big animal. So it's an insult to my lion caste or my lion race. So this is the kind of, racial inferiority, that the species inferiority. Lion gets embarrassed and it contemplates suicide. I'm not proposed by another lion. This lioness, young lioness, contemplates suicide after it was proposed by a male jackal. Jackal was an inferior species, uh, concerning the predatory nature of a big animal like lion or lioness. So this young lioness, which was like 4 or 5 year old, contemplates suicide. But in the end, what happens does that young lioness's brother, another male lion, comes and he kills jackal. So he prevents his sister to commit suicide. So because jackal proposed, this young lioness, now young lioness got embarrassed and contemplating to commit suicide. The male, her brother comes and kills the male jackal and saves her sister. So this tells about the conformity of the hierarchies in ancient Indian society at the time of Buddha between 5th century BC to 1st century AD. So you cannot break the norms. If anyone dared to break the norm of the society, uh, so here Jatakas are again supporting the hierarchy of the ancient Indian society. Here bhikkhus might have seen if anyone reproached or contravened social norms of the sociological conditioning of the ancient Indian society, they were punished. So this, any lower caste man approaching an upper caste girl must have been given this kind of punishment, was told through anthropomorphic story of the jackal and lioness, which contemplated suicide. Lioness' life was saved by her brother when he killed the jackal. So look at how Jataka stories were beautifully uh, telling about the internalized social value system of the humans. So animal kingdom in the Jataka stories thoroughly internalizes the social value system of the humans. Then there is another story of a golden goose. Uh, while the animals occupying the lower positions cannot escape the hierarchy of the that governs them, they too, like men, attempt to break out from their imposed identity. This is a story of a golden goose and a crow. The offspring of the golden goose and the crow, who was neither like his mother or father. So this particular uh, animal was born between a golden goose, his father, and crow, his mother. And it was named as Dinky because it was born between a golden goose, a male golden goose, and a female crow. And this particular hybrid bird was named as Dingy. And this Dingy aspires for a different place for himself. And for a brief moment, likens himself to the king of Vaideha, as he is being flown over by his stepbrothers on a visit to his father. So this Dingy was now living with his crow mother. Then he wants to visit his father, the golden goose. So his stepbrothers, other golden goose, came and took Dingy to their kingdom called Vaideha. Now Dingy was aspiring to become uh, the king of Vaideha, which was a kingdom of the golden goose. So, enraged by the verbalization of Dingy's aspirations, the stepbrothers report the matter to their father. The father, Golden Goose, now hears that Dingy want to become the king of Vaideha. But kingdom of Vaideha was full of golden goose. There is no place for crows. And Dingy was half uh, the he was born between golden goose, half crow, and half golden goose, half goose and half crow. And he was a mixed breed. He was a hybrid species. And this hybrid species want to become the king of Vaideha, which was kingdom of the golden goose. So stepbrothers get angry. We were golden goose, and the king of Vaideha is only for the golden goose. how Dingy can become the emperor of our kingdom. So they complains to the father Golden Goose. So rebuked and rejected by his father, Dingy realizes that he will be acceptable only in the world of his mother. If he goes back to kingdom of crows, he will be accepted because crows are low, so he's somewhat better. He was light in complexion. So it also tells a pretty racial history of that was embedded in the Jataka stories. So in Golden Goose, a crow or a mixed bird species between a crow and golden goose will never be accepted. That's why affirmative action is there. Why government of India implemented this SC/ST reservation? Because our society since ions of time, since the time of Vedic period, is full of discrimination. Our cultural attitudes were full of discrimination. We tend to pretend to be, enlightened souls, but when it comes to our cultural taste, at the end of the day, we are prejudiced and biased. So this is the kind of darkness we had to overcome to embrace the lightness. Why Ambedkar embraced Buddhism? Because Buddha condemned Vedic religion or superiority of the Hindus. Hindus have looked down upon Ambedkar, even he got graduated from Columbia University. He was not allowed to touch the water pot when he was teaching at the Indian universities. He was treated as untouchable. He was humiliated. This humiliation he didn't have in the United States of America when he was doing his PhD. So Dingy has this kind of experience that he was not welcome in the golden goose kingdom of Vaideha. Vaideha belongs to only the population of golden goose. Dingy, a mixed breed, a cross between crow and father goose, have no place in Vaideha kingdom, which belongs to only golden goose. So he had to return to his mother's crow kingdom. There only he can become a ruler. So it made him so embarrassed that social hierarchy, racial hierarchy will be acceptable uh, only in his own crow kingdom, but not in the golden goose kingdom. So it tells about the danger of contravening social barriers is the theme of the story. So Jackal also the same thing, when Jackal said that, "Oh, Linus, I am a 4-foot creature, so are you. Therefore, be my mate. Let us marry." So Jackal and Linus did not see, in this case, the young Linus did not see the essential similarity between them. So it's called transgression of the social code by the low-down Jackal and dishonored by his proposition. The Linus contemplated suicide. So the Dingy and Linus stories tells about transgression of or contravening social barriers imposed by ancient Indian society. This kind of thing was told in anthropomorphic environmental texts. That's why I call it Jataka stories as anthropomorphic environmentalism. This is fascinating, right? Then I will give you another story of what is that Buddhist Jatakas in environment. So now let us move on to the philosophy of environment that was embedded in the Jataka stories. So Jataka stories were also an agency that always tells about environmental concerns. So far, given the sociological history of the Jataka tales through anthropomorphic environmentalism. But what about the virtues of environment that were embedded in the form of storytelling in the Jataka stories? This is one good example of environmental ethics. This particular Jataka story tells. Human arrogance is often cited as a reason for the degradation of the environment. So, in our belief that we are capable of attaining higher and higher goals, that our knowledge is vast, can overcome most natural obstacles imposed by time, obstacles imposed by immediate cultural geography, obstacles imposed by the natural environment. The human species has acquired this arrogance. Sometimes we think that we have conquered the world. You look at the colonial writings of the British men. We say that we cut down. What is the article you have read, The Roles and the Paradoxes of Wildlife Conservation? British always say that we have killed tigers because they were nemesis to civilization. They were tragic symbols of the decimated nature. We conquered Indian environment by killing tigers, killing leopards, because they were troublesome to Indian people. British were saying that they were not enemies of the British. They were enemies of our Indian empire, our Indian subjects. Therefore, they acquired the enmity with us. So in that way, we eliminated all tiger species from the days of the East India Company period to until early part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, when Jim Corbett came to the fore for the rescue of tigers by creating consciousness about wildlife sanctuaries and need of the hour to protect tigers. But British were for 200 years were enemies of tigers. So they decimated. They said that we conquered the environment. When in point of time we conquered the environment, we were killing non-human species, but never, no way we have conquered. We destroyed the forest. That became how long we can live, how many years a British soldier or hunter officer was living in those times. James Outram lived 60 years. John Malcolm, 60 years. General Dyer died with full of strokes and what is his physical disability. He also got the kind of killings he did in Jallianwala Bagh haunted him for the rest of his life. He was a militarized, doctrinized, full of doctrine kind of militarized mindset. So so this is the militaristic mentality we can see in some of the colonial men's lives. How long they did live? Only 60, 50 years, not more than that. So humans' existence, human mortality is always a recurring phenomenon. We can never be immortal. Nature can remain immortal in the sense that a Pleistocene can come. This is what we were thinking the other day about our lecture on climate change. Climate change. So Pleistocene come, a snow, a whole earth can become a full of snow. Mammoths can come back. Elephants can become again mammoths. There may not be a scope for humans living anymore after 1,000 years. In another millennia, human species may disappear because we are projecting that we conquer planet Earth. We build skyscrapers, aeroplanes, cars, beautiful buildings, beautiful technology, mobile phones, earphones, um, all kind of beautiful gadgets. How long we can survive? Maybe another 1,000 years. So natural environment will take its own course of action. So this is what I was telling about volcanoes, earthquakes. The 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, 26 December. I remember it very well before going to Manchester. So sea entering onto Japan's tsunami in 2011. So we cannot stop the natural environment. Japan claimed itself one of the developed nations after it was destroyed in the Second World War, similar like Germany. Whatever the floods in Germany, Germany and Japan were considered most advanced, developed, industrialized, technologically advanced nations. Despite that, Germans couldn't prevent the floods. Japanese couldn't stop that uh, tsunami coming from the Pacific Ocean, where thousands of Japanese people were killed, despite their technological uh, developed status according to those nations, despite being developed economies. So natural world is always dominant. So this is the understanding we get from even Jataka stories. Though at the time, Buddhist people did not see the advancement of technology like us, or they have the idea of the pollution. Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist environmental ethics do warn about, breaking our coexistence principles with our immediate environment. You must protect the forest. We must protect wild species. We also have to survive our own. If you want to kill something, kill. If only you're hungry, but don't kill in it. Don't do anything in excess. So that is the moral philosophy or environmental philosophy coming from Jataka stories. Here I give you a beautiful story of how human arrogance can retaliate in the destruction of the human itself. Never feel arrogant. Arrogance will kill you. So this is the story told by Bodhisattva in one of the Jataka stories. Here I will narrate the story. So it is further believed that it is fascinating to see how arrogance can dim a man's sense of moral responsibility. Pride about knowledge and lack of responsibility is reflected in some Buddhist stories where the protagonist accept unwarranted power. You know, you may be proud of your intellect, proud of your academic scholarship, pride of your English language, pride of I'm very good academic. But any kind of knowledge should be accompanied by social course of social, moral, and ethical philosophy, kindness towards fellow beings, both human and non-human. In the story, a man was given a power and he misuses that power. If he feels very arrogant, oh, I was given this power and I'll make a wild animal to be alive. So this is a fascinating story how he makes a dead tiger alive. But ultimately, his knowledge, his arrogance, he knows the power of making an animal alive. Uh, and ultimately, it destroys him. So this is the story of how arrogance, if a man has a arrogance and, you know, disregards the responsibility, it ultimately destroys him. So the dreadful consequence of such actions are then vividly described in the Sanjiva Jataka. The story comes from Sanjiva Jataka. In the Sanjiva Jataka, a Brahmin who was a disciple of Bodhisattva, who himself is a Brahmin, is taught a spell by the latter for reviving the dead. Any dead, whether it's human or non-human, whether it's a tiger, dead elephant, or dead human. This man was a Brahmin and he was given a kind of, he became a disciple of Bodhisattva. So Sanjeev Jataka tells about the story of a man who felt arrogant, misuses his power, ultimately meets his fate by his own death. But this Brahmin is not taught the counter spell. He was only given a spell of how to revive the dead. But he himself doesn't know if he becomes dead, how he can become a living organism. A counter spell was not taught by Bodhisattva. So the moment he learned that process of the reviving the dead, he felt very arrogant. So in a visit to the forest with his fellow Brahmins, this particular Brahmin offers to revive a tiger. He acts in arrogance and in a boastful way. His friends are more careful and climb a tree while this particular Brahmin is reciting his spell. So he decided that I've been taught by Bodhisattva, Buddha, uh, regarding how to revive a dead animal. So I will try my supernatural powers to bring this dead tiger to become alive. But he learned only half of that knowledge. Half knowledge is dangerous than the complete wisdom of in life. Wisdom is more important than learning. Wisdom is more important than scholarship. So this particular man did not learn wisdom. He was only half the way of learning this magic of spell, reviving uh, the dead bodies into living organisms. Counter spell. If that happens to you, how you can revive yourself is a learning he did not yet finish. So he already felt arrogant. Now I will try. So, but other peoples were warning. Other pupils, his students and scholars were warning. No, don't touch that animal. If you put that animal, it will attack us. So in fear, they climbed the tree. Then this man was reciting those spells that make the tiger to become alive. So later, what happens? The tiger does come to life. So the dead tiger became alive, and immediately it attacks this particular Brahmin in a moment, leaving the man who revived him dead. The tiger kills the man uh, who made this tiger alive. he was chanting the spells, the magic spells. Now tiger becomes alive, and it kills the very man who actually brought him back to life. So a wild species, a wild animal, a predator animal like tiger, will not have any kind of sympathy uh, or any kind of environmental ethics concerning its predatory nature. So in this arrogance was punished by the tiger by attacking the very man who said that he has magical powers, he can do whatever he wants. Ultimately, he meets uh, his end met up with the tiger attacking him and kills him. So this story realizes the misuse of power and responsibility in dealing with nature and animals, and the awful consequences of this can attract. So the question of the unreasonable use of power by human beings plays an important role in environmental debates today, and is especially recognized aspect of anthropocentrism or human centeredness. This and other such stories are obviously a warning that no good will come from human centric arrogance. So this Jataka story is a moral story of human centric arrogance. If you were a king, if you were a minister, if you're a military commander, don't use your power. Use your power for the benefit of humanity. This humanity in Buddhist environmental philosophy, Buddhist environmental consciousness was both applied to human and non-human species. So this man uses this human arrogance, matches his fate by his own death in the hands of the tiger, which he made him revive through his magic spell. So never be arrogant, never misuse your power. So this is the core philosophy coming from the Jataka stories. Then there is another kind of uh, um, how Buddhist philosophy also tells about suffering caused by the destruction of life, but how we undertake to cultivate compassion and use it as a source of energy for the protection of people, animals, plants, and minerals. So the moral tale of this story, where this tiger kills this particular arrogant man, it tells about that never be arrogant, never cause the destruction of life. Always undertake to cultivate the attitudes of compassion as a source of energy for the protection of all living organisms on planet Earth. Biodiversity on this planet Earth must be uh, protected. The elephant was protected by Bodhisattva in the form of a tree. This is a shell shock elephant, which escaped from the human imprisonment, but living in the fear inside of forest. So Buddha accorded protection. So protection was accorded to all vulnerable beings, be it human or non-human, or plants or minerals in the Buddhist Jataka stories. Then there is another kind of beautiful depiction of environmental aesthetics, a poem called At Home in the Mountain. So this was written by one of the Bodhisattva's closest disciple, Mahakashyapa. Mahakashyapa lived around 5th century BC. After Buddha lived around 45 years of age. Did you know that? He didn't live for long. As a young prince, he went, he saw all materiality, death, old age, suffering, poverty, and all. And he goes to this, what is today's Bodh Gaya. He meditates under this banyan tree. He gets enlightened. Then he preaches to those, his enlightenment principles to his fellow Buddhist disciples. So this person, this says, or ascetic called Mahakashyapa, written a poem called At Home in the Mountain. What is this particular poem special about telling about the Buddhist attitudes towards environment? It's an ecological ode uh, sung by Mahakashyapa when he was traveling between Magadha and towards the Himalayas. So this is the English transliteration of this particular poem, composed around 5th century BC by one of the Buddha's disciple Mahakashyapa. Strung with garlands of flowering vines, this patch of earth delights the mind. The lovely calls of the elephants, sound. The rocky cracks to please listen. So he refers to elephants as lovely calls. Whatever elephant sound it makes, he sees it as a lovely calls coming from aesthetics of the immediate environment. The lovely ground is rained upon. The hills are full of holy seeds. He was referring to the snow-clad mountains of the Himalayas in the north. He says that all holy seeds were on the top uh, upper layer of the snow-clad mountains, resounding with the cry of peacocks. These rocky cracks do please me so. Again, he was referring to the presence of peafolds in ancient India during 5th century BC, no occupied by village folk, but visited by herds of deer, strewn with the flocks of various birds. These rocky cracks to please me. So here, Mahakashpa was eulogizing the mountain landscapes, rivers, and forest belts. He was finding the companionship in the midst of the wildlife, such as calls of elephants, visited by herds of deer, and beautiful flowering plantations, and so on. So it tells about how Buddhism was intrinsically linked with the ecological beauty with a detached sense of appreciation. Then, one final story is I will stop with this. This is where it comes, this particular story comes from the Vinaya Pitika. Vinaya Pitika, then also how Buddhist spiritual environmentalism was looking at water bodies. In one of the story, Buddha prohibits, he makes that water should be conserved and it should not be polluted. So when we look at the Buddhist pronouncements on water conservation, it is astonishing to see that he actually sets down rules for forbidding his disciple to contaminate water resources. For example, Buddhist monks were dissuaded from throwing their waste or leftover food into rivers and lakes, and they were urged to guard the lives of all living beings abiding there. Purity and pollution. You cannot pollute your immediate water body. You cannot throw away your leftover food in the street or near to the water body because it will pollute. So water was the purity of mind was compared with the purity of water. A lake where you can see fish were roaming underneath of this water body was described in tandem with the purity of mind. So mind also should dwell on spirituality rather than materiality. Don't think about people. Don't think about prejudices. Keep your mind in a meditative state, as pure as a pure water body, where you can see beautiful lotuses, its leaves, its trunk, but also colors of fish underneath that water body, because this water body was pure. It was uncontaminated. So you can see different colors of fish in that particular pond or particular lake or particular body. So this is what Buddhist environmentalism tells about water conservation. So in the Vinaya Pitaka, there are detailed descriptions of how to build toilets and water wells. One of the 8 good qualities of the ocean is cleanliness, and another is that it must be the abode of various kinds of fish. This illustrates early awareness of the Buddhism regarding the need to preserve non-human. So preservation of uh, a village or a town is as important as preservation of a forest or protection of an elephant, but also protection of water bodies. So water bodies were beautifully incorporated into Buddhist environmental ethics. So the early Buddhist community lived comfortably within natural environment, and the Bodhisattva, that is the Buddha, included many examples and similes from natural environment in his teachings. This is another kind of thing coming from Pali canon of the Buddhist literature told by Buddha himself. So within quotes, quote, suppose there is a pool of water, turbid, stirred up, and muddied. Just so a turbid mind. Don't be a turbid mind. If you go to a lake, you just put your hand, make waves of that particular spot in that lake. Uh, Mud comes upwards. So you cannot see what was in underneath of that water. There could be a water snake. There could be some fish. There could be some prawn. There, some crab or a lotus flower or a water lily or any flower will be there. If you just, pushes that water, mud will come. So you cannot see anything. So turbid mind was like that. If we fill our mind with material thoughts, it will become a turbid mind. We cannot, our vision will be impaired. Vision of impairment is not that our eyes. Vision of impairment is in our mind. So don't be a turbid mind. Here Bodhisattva tells through the example of preservation of maintaining cleanliness, like a clean water in a lake. This clean water, we can see everything. Fish underneath, living organisms underneath of that lake, lotuses, water lilies, different kinds of species, a deer coming to drink that water, tiger coming to drink that water. So because this is the purity of mind, you can see the purity of the food. So non-human world, natural environment can teach us a lesson that don't be a turbid mind. So this stanza goes further. Suppose there is a pool of water, pure. This is the second pool of water. First pool of water was stirred up and it become muddied. So we cannot see anything. Similarly, in vain, a turbid mind cannot see anything because it pollutes our way of thinking, our way of looking outside world. But if there is a pool of water that is pure, tranquil, unstirred, means unmoved, mind has to be like that. It has to be pure, tranquil, and unstirred. Where a man or a human can see oysters and shells underneath of that lake or a pond, pebbles and gravel, and schools of fish, different varieties of fish species can be seen in this pure, tranquil, unstirred water. So, just so an untroubled mind. So, if you have an untroubled mind, you are attaining that nirvana. Then, Buddhism also holds a great respect for and gratitude towards environment and ecology. Among the striking expressions in Buddhist literature was an intrinsic appreciation of mutual relationship and interdependence of humankind and wildlife. So this was taken from one of the ancient Indian scholars, Chosmaran Kabil Singh, early Buddhist views on nature. There was early realization that survival of certain species was endangered and that losing such creatures would diminish the earth. If we go back to the early 20th century hunter conservationist philosopher of Jim Corbett, without tiger, India will become poorer. If there is no tiger, there is no aesthetics of the environment. Tiger is our wealth. It's not Mukesh Ambani is our wealth or Ratan Tata. Some of us in a human world celebrates billionaires because of their innovative way of creating jobs and running the richness of the economy. But for a baiga or a goat, richness lies in the forest, not in urban way of life. So Jim Corbett tells about without leopard. Leopard has the beautiful spots on his skin. Tiger is, one of the British colonial officer hunter. Reginald Burton advocated that tiger has aesthetic beauty. Look at the golden skin and its beautiful spots and its magnificent royal look. In Ramayana and Mahabharata is full of eulogy. Even in Chola, Akampuram poems, tiger was eulogized as a beautiful, magnificent beast. So this was acknowledged by some of the British conservationists who were erstwhile hunters later turned into conservation, such as Burton, who became a naturalist, Jim Corbett, who became foremost conservationist of tigers. Without tiger, without leopard, India becomes poor. So we need to protect that. Here, Buddha was envisioning this kind of philosophy 2500 years ago, that come back, O tigers, to the woods again, and let it not be leveled with the plain. For without you, these acts will lay low. You, without it, forever homeless go. So without tigers, forest become like an orphan. uh, so let us not make this forest as plain. So without tigers, there are no woods, there is homelessness. Only with tigers. So tiger is part and parcel of the family of the forest. With tigers, the beauty gets enriched. Like there is a government, there is a prime minister, there is a president. We have the system of democracy. Our system of democracy protects our rights. As a, it's a, our democracy has flaws, but we are better off compared with the dictatorship in China. In China, you cannot speak against President Xi Jinping. You will be imprisoned or you will be killed if you are a political protester. But if in India you're a political protester, we may get blamed as a left or right wing or a communist, but we still are okay in terms of expressing our political dissent, political criticism against dominant government. In China, this won't be possible. In Myanmar, this won't be possible. In Myanmar, recently, Aung San Suu Kyi, been imprisoned for 2 years because she was advocating for democracy and freedom of expression. So that was the thing. So this is so-called democratic functioning of society, free will, where individual liberty, individual healthy nourishment in the form of liberated human beings was advocated by Buddha in the context of environmentalism in ancient India, when he was saying that without tiger, forest will become poorer, forest become homeless. Let us not make this forest as plain area or a village. So he was advocating against destruction, cutting down of the forest. Mauryans were cutting down the forest. Though Emperor Ashoka became an advocate of the Buddhist philosophy, embraced ahimsa, given up eating peafoods, rabbits, or any kind of non-vegetarian meat in the royal palace, royal kitchen. They were cutting down the forest. But Buddha himself, as Bodhisattva, in Jataka stories, advocating against destruction of any kind of wild species without any reason. Then there is one final story about Rukkadama Jataka. It tells about Jataka tells further engagement with Indian ecology. So in the Rukkadama Jataka, union is strength. Here tells about unity is strength. You know, within your family, within your community, within your occupational group, you have to cultivate the tenet, the virtue of unity. Vice and virtues whole in the form of environmental ethics, in the form of anthropomorphic environmentalism, the form of human and non-human whole, the form of elephant, tiger, lion. But this is about virtue of unity. That was mentioned the Rukkadama Jataka. In the Rukkadama Jataka, union was told in terms of environmental virtue among trees as among men. So how trees were united, so men also should be united. This is the moral tale coming from the environmental ethics coming from Rukkadama Jataka. In the Rukkadama Jataka, a quarrel had arisen regarding water rights, the issues surrounding water rights. In response, the Buddha told a tale of his past life as the spirit of a salt tree in the Himalayas. So when water quarrel happened between two villagers in one of the Magadha kingdom in the 5th century BC, Bodhisattva goes there as an ascetic and tells that a past story in this Rukkadama Jataka. During the reign of King Visava, The trees, shrubs, bushes, and plants were all invited to choose a new epoch. A new place was uh, given for these different kind of tree species, trees, shrubs, bushes, plants, flowers, and everything. The future Buddha tree advised all his kinsfolk to shun trees that stood alone in the open and to take up their abode in the forest. So there is Buddha here appears as one of the sage tree, one of the old tree, and tells that don't go to that new abode. Don't stand on your own. Always live in the forest. Don't go to villages. Don't go to towns. So it tells about our urban environment. Look at a lot of flats are coming. I live in the south campus of Hyderabad. uh, Skyscrapers were being built in by working day and night, employing thousands of workers. I cannot see any tree. When I joined Hyderabad in 2018, there were lots of trees, but on our campus, we still have that forest, that wild terrain. Though we do not have tigers, we still have peafools, deer, wild pig, and so on, snakes, and some kind of waterfall. If you go to the Cow Lake uh, in the Hyderabad University campus, but tigers were not to be seen. But if you come out of our University of Hyderabad campus, it's full of urban jungle. So this Buddhist Jataka relates to propels us to think about our urban environment, how we are actually cutting down the trees will backfire in the future, if not now, but certainly for our successors, our future generations. So here Buddha tree advised his kinsfolk, shun the trees that stood alone, don't stand alone, be united, and take up your abode in the forest. The wise vegetative spirit followed his advice, but the proud and foolish trees instead chose to dwell outside the villages and towns to reap the benefits offered by townspeople who worship such trees. So some of the foolish trees didn't listen to Bodhisattva's advice. We wanted to go to towns, we wanted to go to villages because these villages are worshipping as gods. If everyone conserve, oh, tiger among men, oh, golden king. If I offer eulogies like a poet of ancient India in royal courts, I will be given lots of elephants as reward instead of shooting a tiger book. If it was dedicated to some ancient king, I would have got some 500 elephants as a reward. Um, I'm just giving a metaphorical use now. Uh, the thing called ecology played out a kind of favorable benefit in your material improvement of life. But here Buddha wants that don't go to village, don't go to a town to these trees. Some trees heeded the advice of Bodhisattva, so they remained in the forest as united. Some trees individually went to different villages, different towns, because they began to be worshipped by these villagers in this ancient Indian uh, what this peripheral areas. So they left the forest and came to inhabit giant trees which grow in open space. So they remind us individual giant trees in different parts of the village, in different parts of the towns in northern part of India. One day, a mighty storm swept over the countryside. The solitary trees, despite their years of growth, deep into the rich farmland, suffered greatly. Their branches snapped. This mighty storm brought full force wind. So branches snapped, their trunk collapsed, and they were uprooted, flung to the earth by the tempest. The storm destroyed the solitary trees, which were decided to move into the villages and towns. They were totally uprooted with roots. So, what is the moral of the story? But when the storm hit the salt forest, so this forest was like a virgin forest. All salt trees were together. They decided not to go to the village. So they were no longer living solitary, but as a combined forest of interlacing trees where the future Buddha dwelt. His fury was in vain. The storm has destroyed the solitary trees in the villages and towns, but it could not destroy the salt forest, where this Bodhisattva advocated that "O trees, live with me in the forest. Once we are united, nothing can harm us." So the storm with forceful winds of 200 kilometers, 150 kilometers per hour, uprooted every tree in every village in the town. Because they were uprooted, because they were solitary. But within the forest, nothing of that calamity happened. So storm's fury was in vain, not a tree could be overthrown. In a touching conclusion, the Bodhisattva narrates that the forlorn fairies whose dwellings were destroyed took their children in their arms and journeyed to the Himalayas. The future Buddha responded with the verse. So this is the moral of the story coming from this Rukkadama Jataka. United forest life should kinsfolk stand. The storm overthrows the solitary. If your family, if you're living in a society, if you're living in a community, if you're living in any kind of circles, always remain united, free-minded, free-spirited, with a liberal frame of mindset. Don't have any prejudices. So united forest life should kinsfolk stand. The storm overthrows the solitary tree. So solitary tree was overthrown and united trees of the salt forest were protected. So storm could not uproot the combined united salt trees in the forest, but they have uprooted solitary. So if you stand alone in the society, uh, you will be in difficulty. He cannot be a lone fighter. You know what happens? A lion uh, surrounded by 12 and 20 pack of hyenas. You might watch this Discovery Channel, Geography Channel, where you can see Animal Kingdom still filming. Sometimes a lioness or lion suddenly confronted by a pack of hyenas. Hyenas hunt together, wild dogs hunt together. Hence, their success of hunting is much more than a solitary hunter like tiger. You know, in the case of tiger, 80% of its hunts were unsuccessful. In the case of hyenas, and wild dogs, which hunting packs, also wolves, coyotes in North America. They bring down bison because they have the collective unity. So this is the moral of the story Buddha was telling. If we were united, we can fight any kind of calamity. But if you stand alone, that don't want to listen to my father, I don't want to listen to my father, my mother, or my professor. I want to stand on my own. I will work hard, independently become something. That won't be possible in tenets of materiality of life. This is the same principle applicable even in the non-human world. Look at American bison can be brought down only with a pack of wolves. Sometimes a predatory animal like a tiger or lion. Lions live in pride. So they confront because once lions are united, hyenas cannot do anything. Sometimes they get what is this Abhimanyu got in Kaurava's uh, flanks of that military attack. Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna, gets killed in the Mahabharata. Sometimes a lion, which actually strays from its pride, gets killed by a pack of hyenas or pack of wild dogs. These were rare occurrences. Happens, do happen in the wild. But the moral of the story is remain as a united salt forest in uh, in the wild rather than become a solitary tree into civilization. So all standalone trees were uprooted in the storm. So any struggle comes, we have to be united. So this tells about environmental ethics, but also moral philosophy of Buddhism in the form of anthropomorphic environmentalism and aesthetic environmentalism, but also philosophy of environment and environmentalism of vice and virtue through animal characters narrated in the Jataka stories. Okay, I'll stop here. I gave very good examples. I'll send some very interesting articles. There is one theoretical part written by this particular professor from Delhi University. You can also see, I also gave this, anthropomorphic environmentalism is what we can take as a historical method of understanding or uncovering or fathoming the history of environment in relation to society between 5th century BC and 4th century AD in the Jataka stories. Okay, I stop here. Have you understood the lecture? Do you have any questions? Please ask. Yes, guys, speak to me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you
Yes,
have any
sir.
questions regarding?
Sir, I actually have an observation to make.
Sir.
Sir, I was recollecting the visual culture of the medallions of the Sanchi and Bharut Stupa. So the only
Mhm,
exposure I have to Jatakas is through that. So I think it was the Chadanta Jataka, the elephant Jataka story. There is
mhm.
this scene in which sir, the ivory, the tusk of the elephant is being cut off, the bodhisattva. So, can we relate this to the Sanchi Torana, where the ivory carver's profession is also mentioned? Because this is the same period, I guess. So, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about
Making a
in the visual.
collaborative understanding. Yeah, yeah, you
Yes.
can make it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, exactly. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Jatakas like the Vasantara Jataka, in which the magical white elephant is sold off. And there is this
Mm,
quite rich, vibrant life of the forests that is exposed. And even the Nagaraja on the railing of the Bharut and the Shalabanjikas, the Chandayakshi, Devata, all of these represent vegetative, fertile spirits. So I was relating this with that. And also the Mahakapi Jataka, in which the arch enemy of Buddha, that is Devadatta, uh, uh, to escape the king and the armies who have entered the forest. I
mm. Yeah, sure. That some of the interesting stuff coming from your own research, but you also look at the materiality of life, but the philosophy of environment. So this is the methodology employed in you. This is very relevant to your own research, I think. Today's lecture. So materiality of life. This is one framework, conceptual
Italian.
framework you can employ in relation to the philosophy of environment. So you can, yeah, give the analysis on. But try to publish an article. Have you begun collecting the primary sources? Have you gathered some sources already?
No, sir. I
Yes,
was just thinking
Anjana, have you read some of the Jataka stories and consulted the archaeological and epigraphical inscriptional sources concerning your research?
sir, from the
Tiger and
gender
elephants are
perspective,
considered
not.
a symbol of political powers. This is Tanya Sharma's comment. Uh, but I think deer is also used for that. Deer as a political symbol. Elephant and tigers have, uh, but deer was given a kind of coexistence in the Buddhist philosophy of environment and in Buddhist philosophy of coexisting with the immediate ecology and non-human species. But tigers and elephants were nevertheless given a symbol of political power and royal prestige. That's correct. Okay. Yeah, Anjana. Yeah, please try to publish. That is very interesting. Don't put till the end of your PhD. Try to write an article. Give Oxford University presses some journals, Journal of like Hindu philosophy or Journal of ancient philosophy. Please do submit to
Okay, sir.
those journals. Yeah, I encourage
Sir,
you
I
to
will try.
publish. Yeah, by the
Sir, I have
time
one
you,
doubt.
yeah, go on.
Sir, all these medallions and all these vibrant forest life that is shown in these medallions, sir,
Mm.
can we link it to the Jetavana grant? Because it kind of shows that forests should be kept as secluded places which are to be reserved for the Sangha and the monastic order and should not be entered by the kings and all. Because these are the medallions that the Upasakas are actually looking at while circumambulating around the stupa. So, was there this conscious effort to increase environmental knowledge?
Well, it was a conscious effort or natural outcome of their proximity to the natural environment, right? It was a conscious effort, but it was also a kind of how they were living between civilized world and what is this environmental world. human world and non-human world. So it might be a conscious undertaking, but something that we have to figure it out. Uh, but it's natural. That's what I'm saying. Methodology as in a anthropomorphic environmentalism. That's our intervention. It could be the thing among the Buddhist monks and Buddhist philosophers that they have to protect themselves from the clutches of the monarchical power or political kingdoms. It could be a conscious effort. So they were also bringing this environmentalism as a way of ascertaining their aesthetic power between civilized world and animal world. So that's the sense we can make out of it. So it could be a conscious effort. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, my power has gone. I think my battery fully ran away. It will go away at any minute. I had power cut at the moment I began lecture. So my 2 hours battery ran, I think. So yeah, okay, I will send the articles by tonight, but also recording of the lecture. So it's nice interacting with you. Uh, Good luck with your PhDs. I may not take lectures anymore, but I see you at seminars, seminar presentations. So let us meet sometime virtually once you are back to the campus after this COVID debacle goes away. I pray that this COVID will go away. I can see students on the campus. Good luck with your PhDs. Let us see sometime next year. Happy New Year and good luck with everything. Material I will provide via email, recordings as well. So thanks for listening patiently. Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
yeah.
Thank you,
You can
sir.
leave the class.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
you guys. Yeah, bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya.